Hello and welcome back to our channel Club to Learn. Today we have one of the minds behind the world's first electric truck, which is now redefining the automotive industry. Someone who has lived a life from being an innovator to now being an entrepreneur. Mr. Nachiket Vader, the mechanical genius who is driving the future of sustainable transportation. Let's hear out from him.
Welcome to another episode. आज मेरे साथ I have my really good friend Nachiket, and we'll be talking more about the energy and EV industry today.
I guess it all begins with, I was always a car guy. We're kind of a separate breed of people. We're always obsessed with cars. So all of my career decisions essentially lined up with that one goal.
So what actually attracted you towards this?
Well, everything that was in the news at that time about the EV industry was all thanks to Tesla. For me, what attracted me towards the industry was that the obvious fact that this was the future. I think the Indian customer is extremely intelligent. Whatever I might list out as the advantage of an electric vehicle, the customer already knows. What an EV gives you is much more in terms of features. Very little maintenance, much better driving experience.
So you have undertaken a journey from being an innovator to now being an entrepreneur. So what do you think about the Indian markets?
In terms of entrepreneurship, because it's early, I think there are a lot of investment avenues who are aware that because it's early, there is opportunity.
There were instances of these electric vehicles catching fire. I met a lot of people. One primary concern that I faced with them was, "Gaadi jal jayegi."
No, there are regular vehicles that have also caught on fire. So, it's just these things grab attention because they are a new.
So welcome to another episode of the Bulls, Bears and Breakthroughs. आज मेरे साथ I have my really good friend Nachiket. And we'll be talking more about the energy and EV industry today. Better than giving an introduction to him, why don't we just ask him to take us through his journey? So, hi Nachiket.
Hello.
So, from studying mechanical engineering to getting into the EV industry to being a core member of the team of Rivian, why don't you take us through your journey?
Well, I guess it all begins with, I was always a car guy. For those who know, we're kind of a separate breed of people. We're always obsessed with cars. So all of my career decisions essentially lined up with that one goal, mechanical engineering, because I always wanted to build cars. After doing my graduation in India, I went and moved to Detroit, Michigan, which is supposed to be the automotive capital of the world. I did my master's again in mechanical engineering. And honestly, my focus at that time was engines. I was an old school automotive guy, and I wanted to focus on engines. But when I was there, it just happened that I couldn't get the thesis role that I wanted to get with a particular professor, and I got referred to an advanced technologies team at what was then FCA, Fiat Chrysler, and I showed up at that job, and I discovered electrification in automotive, and since then that sort of put me on that path.
But was it a choice or it was a compulsion that you had to opt out for this course?
It was a bit of a compulsion, yes, but I was glad that it happened because it put me on a path that was more promising in the future. And today, again, I'm very glad that happened. So starting electrification at that time, I worked on a lot of hybrid vehicles, some EVs as well. And for the 2-3 years that I was there, I essentially bought into the fact that yes, everything needs to go electric. And as an engineer, electrification of vehicles is an interesting concept in itself. So after 3 years at Chrysler at that point, I came across Rivian. And at that time, Rivian was just 30 people who called themselves a startup. And
you were part of those 30 people.
I mean, before I joined, there were just 30
Yeah.
odd people. And I went and interviewed with them. I spoke to them. I was at a point in my career where I was like, if I'm ever going to take a risk, it has to be now. I was like 27, 28 at that time. So I was like, I went and spoke to them. I spoke to my hiring manager at that time. And those were the smartest people I had ever. I had like a 15-minute conversation with them, smartest conversation that I had ever had, and showed up at that place. Extremely like amazing people, extremely passionate, and for a car guy, like I said in the beginning, being surrounded by like-minded people was going to be an amazing experience. So I really took a decision on a whim that I was going to, work for this company. Let's try this out for maybe a year or two or however long this lasts. Didn't have very high expectations at all, if I'm honest. But over those 2 years, my confidence in the team
And the
grew
company.
really, really strong. And after the 2 years, after from the second to let's say like the fourth year, the company also attracted a lot of amazing attention in the form of investments, in the form of partnerships, tie-ups, which basically made the risk absolutely worth it. And like the work that we were doing at that point, I had a particular skill set that I was allowed to sort of broaden and expand on. That opportunity I could have only gotten at a startup like Rivian. So I took that opportunity, and yeah, I mean, like they say, rest is history. And 7 years later, we were going through an IPO, and now Rivian has 3 products in the market, manufacturing. I think the last I heard, over 50,000 vehicles a year for a company in their second or third year of production. Hitting those numbers is amazing, and that's been the best part of my career so far. Since then, having worked at Rivian, the product that we built there was the world's first mass-produced electric truck.
Trucks.
Now, for anyone who knows what the pickup truck market in the US looks like, the pickup truck essentially is the highest selling vehicle.
We'll get back to this
Okay.
because there is a lot to talk about on this. But I just wanted to know, when you started off at Rivian, or when you started off in the electric vehicle markets, there was not a lot of talks about this industry, correct? I don't know. I am not sure when this industry started picking up pace. So what actually attracted you towards this?
Well, everything in that was in the news at that time about the EV industry was all thanks to Tesla. Right? They were the ones who were championing this move to electrification. And for me, what attracted me towards the industry was that the obvious fact that this was the future. I mean, as an engineer looking at the product, an electric vehicle itself is the most efficient machine of its kind that can be made. Like from the energy that you put into the vehicle to how much you can drive, right? It's hands down the most efficient thing. You can talk about different biofuels and other kind of things, but the way an electric vehicle turns energy into distance driven, there it has no comparison. So for me, as from a fundamental standpoint as an engineer, it was very obvious that this is going to be the future. So that's what sort of riveted me
Towards
electric vehicles.
Okay. And you haven't regretted that part?
Not at all. I mean, it has its challenges. I mean, I'm not saying electric vehicles are flawless, but having this fundamental piece in place makes all the challenges worth overcoming. And that's why there has been this increase in attention and investment and amount of work that has gone into making electric vehicles viable, and they have become viable. And we are at a point where we know that a big chunk of the fleet, the world's fleet in the future, is going to be electric.
Okay, cool. So we'll get more over the challenges in the later part. So you were telling us about the mass-produced trucks.
Yeah, so at Rivian, we built the world's first mass-produced electric truck. The electric truck is the most popular vehicle in the US, which is the biggest automotive market in the world. And it is also the most used vehicle in terms of the fact that it's a real workhorse. An electric truck is not just used as a family vehicle, but it tows, it goes off road, it performs a lot of work. There's a lot of miles that are put on the electric truck every year. So it's a real workhorse. When we decided to do that, the kind of electric vehicles that were in the market were all small cars, were all either small cars or really fast sedans. And the nature of, the electric vehicle itself, like, having a motor that can, push it really fast, made it very ideal for those, for those applications. But for an electric truck, it was a bit of a stretch. And we looked at it as a so-called white space in the market where nobody would attempt it because it was just a problem that was a bit far-fetched. At Rivian, we decided to, take up the challenge. And we made it happen. The truck that we have, it also turned out to be the most off-road worthy electric vehicle that was built. Also, the world's first, I think, mass-produced 4-motor electric vehicle.
Precisely. So I was coming back to it. So this is the truck that you're talking about. It was the first electric motor powering wheel for electrifying trucks.
Yeah, it has an electric motor powering each wheel. So the wheel itself isn't, it's not a hub motor, but yes, it has an independent electric motor powering every wheel. So it has 4 wheels, 4 electric motors.
So what were the challenges that you faced since it is the world's first thing?
The challenge is, the truck was going to be heavy because of that. But more than the challenge, the opportunity was in the fact that being able to control each wheel independently gave you a lot of command on the dynamics of the vehicle. You could do a lot of crazy things. One of the things we patented on the truck, which is not on the production vehicle, let me make that clear, is something called tank turn, which where the truck sort of spins on its own axis. That's a gimmick that's not in the production vehicle, but the idea is that if you can control each individual wheel separately, you can make a heavy truck go around corners and in off-road and things like that. You can make it much more safe, much more fast, and much more sure-footed to drive. And that opportunity on a mass market vehicle has never, no engineer has had that before. So that was the exciting thing. Technically, it's a challenge. It's a problem that nobody else had solved before. So it was fun to do. It was all, we had to fall back on fundamental physics. We couldn't emulate somebody else's, product. We had to go back to the basics and figure it all out for ourselves, which was the fun part, which is what engineers want to do. And I'm glad we did it well.
Do you think this technology in the future could be a game changer for the transportation or the logistics industry?
The 4-motor?
Yeah.
I think for performance vehicles, yes. For vehicles that are designed to do certain things really, really well. From a I said economical standpoint, maybe a mass market standpoint, maybe it's not necessary. But for a certain kind of vehicle, a high performance truck or a high performance sports car, you don't get more control over the vehicle's dynamics than having 4 individually driven wheels. So for that, yes, absolutely, it's a game changer.
Okay, amazing. So basically, there must be many challenges also that you must have faced during this journey. These are all the good points, right?
Yeah.
There must be challenges. At times you feel frustrated with what you're doing or innovating, so can you share some of the challenges with us?
Like I said, the challenge essentially is you have to fall back on what you learned in school and college and
go back to the basics.
Go back to the basics and start from first principles and build a control theory out of really nothing. The only way that you know your so I was responsible for the sort of prototype or talk path, which is the software that runs the vehicle. Essentially tells the motors what to do when the driver presses the accelerator pedal. Um, we had to go back to the basics and figure that out for a four motor vehicle, especially when we wanted to do all of these things that a four motor vehicle can do. Uh, Being able to sort of we had to sort of the challenges were not enough time that you have in every startup, but again, like the challenges were essentially just pushing us to work harder. They weren't something that frustrated us as such, because at the end of the day, like I said, it was the first of its kind product, and we were passionate about what we were doing. We were really excited about the problem at hand, and just knowing the fact that you're the first people who are putting this out there is enough to overcome any frustration, sleepless nights, lack of sleep, whatever, right? So yeah, I mean, having now that it's done, I hope it has set the benchmark for what this kind of a product can do in the future. Yeah.
That's amazing. And what I would say is you had a brilliant future back in the US as well, with the IPO coming up, with more funding coming in, with a group of passionate people wanting to innovate. What made you decide to come back to India?
Exactly, following that brilliant future. This was the next step. I know it doesn't seem very intuitive, but what happens when you work for a startup that actually becomes successful is that the startup bug bites you, and then you cannot think of a proper 9 to 5 job, doing a regular thing. And the enabling part of it is meeting all those people that you met in during those stages. Like people say, the hardest part is going from 0 to 1, right? When you meet a group of people with whom together you have gone from 0 to 1, then you kind of want to do it again, and you want to do it for yourself, so what made me move back to India is essentially me and a group of people coming together and deciding, okay, we want to do this for ourselves all over again. And India, obviously, because not just the fact that it's home for me, but I have always seen India as a market that's somehow more suitable for electrification. Although it doesn't, it might again not be intuitive to most people, but it is some of the challenges that we faced in the US, the range that was required, the speeds that vehicles have to have, the performance that they have to have, the size of the vehicle, the demands put on the vehicle, the amount of mileage those vehicles accrue. The average Indian vehicle doesn't have those demands, so it should be easier to electrify the fleet in India, and we have always known this. So when we built the electric truck, we knew that we have essentially pushed electrification into a place where now anything can get electrified. And once that happens, we as engineers, we turn around and look back at our own product and what that has done, and we realize that there are two things. One, can this electric vehicle be made better? The answer to that is obviously yes. Everything can, all limits can be pushed. And the second thing is, what would be the bottleneck for electrification or electric vehicles to be adopted on a much larger scale? That is where the energy part comes in. And again, we looked at India, where the electric vehicle market was still in its early stages. There was an opportunity to help bridge the technology gap on the vehicle side as well, but there was an opportunity to ready the energy aspect of it, which is basically the grid that feeds into these electric vehicles, to prepare the grid for much more, many more electric vehicles being adopted very quickly. And the fact that we have a lot of public transport is also another thing. See, electric vehicles are they're expensive to build and buy in the very beginning, but there is a
But
huge
they average
advantage
out
in-
on the cost in the
running
later
cost.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, running cost is a huge advantage. And in a place where you have a lot of public transport, the first thing that you see going electric is the bus, right? The electric bus. I mean,
Right.
you already know how many cities we have that have adopted electric buses on a large scale. Now they're all plugging into the grid. They're all drawing from the grid, and that that puts a certain load on the grid. The grid needs balancing. There's details of that we can go into, but basically you need to prepare the grid to be able to provide energy for a huge fleet of electric vehicles, and how to manage that, how to balance that, how to include renewable sources of energy into the grid. Those are the problems that we saw as the next challenge, and we were like, hey, we've done the impossible once, let's do it all over again.
Okay, so we have seen there has been a lot of increase in the purchase of electric vehicles in the recent past in India. I'm talking about the Indian markets now. Do you think these are the factors that are responsible for that increase?
Yeah. I think the Indian customer is extremely intelligent. I mean, they whatever I might list out as the advantage of an electric vehicle, the customer already knows. I mean, running cost, sitting and idling in traffic in the city, being able to charge in your own home, not needing a lot of range, and again, not needing the car for long distance travel as much because you have public transport. All of these things, like, the Indian customer already knows. If you can put an electric vehicle version of an existing vehicle within the purchase price capacity of a customer, it's going to be a very appealing product.
That's coming to this. I think India is a very price sensitive market.
Yeah.
So, do you think the initial cost of acquisition of an electric vehicle is much higher than a normal vehicle?
Yes.
So, do you think this can have an impact probably now or later on?
Yeah, it does. I mean, as we speak right now, regular vehicles are outselling electric vehicles for that exact reason. I guess a better way of articulating that is, whatever you pay more initially, if you can get that amount back within 3 years, then that's the target that you should try to hit. If that happens, then any customer will sort of choose to pay that higher price initially to have lower running costs, because after 3 years, whatever he saves on his running cost is all money in the bank, right? Like, it's all his advantage. Right now, that is a bit too high. I think that's like 6 to 8 years, depending on what car you're looking at.
Okay. So, what will be the shelf life of an EV? Like, generally, we say that any car is good to run for 5 years probably. So, if you say the break even happens around year 3, then what is the shelf life of an EV?
Oh, if you think a car can be driven for 5 years and then you need to switch it
Probably
out, then
replace,
then EVs last like 8 years is the average. Like, I mean, EVs have lasted longer than that.
So you have more opportunity to recover the cost rather than thinking of the initial investment.
Yes.
From a very layman perspective, I'll tell you something. So when I was about to buy a car, so I was considering a normal vehicle versus an EV, and I was very keen on getting an EV. So generally, in a place where I have 2 vehicles, one normal vehicle with one EV suits me well, because EV is good for shorter distances.
Yeah.
Right? And the normal car can be used for long distance journeys where I want to take road trips and things. Do you think that the grid system that you're talking about will help bridge this gap as well? Because generally when we are traveling longer distances in an EV, charging becomes a problem. Or can there be a solution? Probably.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Can there be a solution wherein it becomes easy to refill or recharge the vehicle in long distances as well?
Right. So I'll give you an analogy of smartphones. We are both old enough to remember the old phones where you probably had to charge them only once or twice a week, and they would run.
And they were
right?
good to run. Yeah.
They were good to run. There was no issues with it. But when the smartphone came in,
The
it
performance,
offered so
yeah.
much performance and so many features and everything. Obviously, those features come at the expense of consuming more energy. And today, everybody has a smartphone that you're lucky if you get through the day without ever have to charging it.
Yeah.
Right. So that is the analogy of like range. What an EV gives you is uh, much more in terms of features. Now you would say what these features are. Very little maintenance, a much better driving experience. Not everybody wants to drive a sports car or drive anything in a sporty manner. Most people look at vehicles as point A to point B, transport. I mean, you've driven an EV, so you know, like the
Yeah.
experience of driving in an EV is much better compared to a regular vehicle. Within the city, at least,
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
magnifies. What you get in the return of not having a lot of range, EVs still make a good case for themselves, right? So I would say the EVs do not need to have the kind of range that that you need to let's say take road trips. You would need to put huge batteries in it, and that's sometimes unnecessary. So what I would say is that just like for the smartphones, we now live in a world where you have charging points literally in every car and trains and everything. The entire ecosystem sort of
Falls into place for
fell
us
into
to
place
use. Yeah.
because the smartphone was such a thing. Like smartphone was became such an integral part of everybody's life that the entire ecosystem adapted itself around the use of smartphones. I think that's what's going to happen with EVs. It is going to make so much sense to drive an electric vehicle, especially in the urban centers, that the infrastructure will show up. And is it as easy as putting a USB plug everywhere? No, it's a little difficult, but it will happen. And that's a part of the solution that we bring in with Recursive. But I think in urban centers, definitely you will have the ability to travel for as long as you want with a charger within driving distance, and something that doesn't extend your trip too long. So that's bound to happen. I will also say that EVs are not going to replace every single vehicle, right?
That was my next question.
Yeah.
Do you think whether they will be they'll replace the normal vehicles, or will it be will the usage be mutually exclusive? Probably.
No, I mean there'll be a lot of overlap for sure, but I mean, in my mind, anywhere between 30 to 50% of all vehicles on the road
Will be replaced
will
by
be replaced
EVs.
by electric vehicles. The overlap I talk about is, let's say you're like a bus operator where you have a fleet of buses, and there are different routes that you are handling, and you need to send a bus. You have just a group of buses that you send wherever there is a trip happening. That kind of a user will obviously prefer something where he doesn't have to worry about the electric infrastructure and all of that. But if you are MSRTC, who needs to operate a certain amount of buses between two urban centers, Mumbai and Pune, and they just keep going back and forth like a shuttle service, there, if you know that you have a predictable duty cycle of of your vehicle, there you can sort of create an ecosystem, charging infrastructure that allows you to do that. So there will be EV vehicle type A and a non-EV vehicle type A, but the use cases are slightly different.
Okay. So you were talking about Recursive by it's a newly formed company, I
Yeah.
believe, and that's the company that you have incorporated in India,
Yeah.
right? So what are you actually planning to do through Recursive?
So at Recursive Energy, we essentially address the bottleneck that gets created in the energy sector for mass adoption of electric vehicles. Now, electric vehicles is just one of the things that is suddenly going to start consuming a lot of electricity. There were other small things, like I said, the smartphone, that increase the electric consumption per capita of every person. So when the electric vehicle does come in, there's going to be huge upgrades that are required to be made to the grid. Currently, at least in India, the grid is being fed by a lot of carbon emitting sources of energy, like mostly coal, right? So as our consumption of electricity goes up, as the challenges in managing the load or balancing the grid sort of go up, and as we face more pressure on trying to decarbonize the grid, there are a couple of solutions that have to sort of be brought in. One of them is we have to bring in a lot of renewables. Long story short, what happens is you're going to have a way to manage this grid, which is expanding, which is becoming more volatile, and it has to now shift from its primary source of coal to renewable sources like solar. Coal is something that you can switch on and switch off, solar not so much. So you're going to have a way to balance this grid, a way to keep providing increasing amounts of electricity to your consumer while switching from a switchable source of energy to something that you don't have much control on. This requires grid level energy storage. Recursive essentially works on that aspect.
On providing solutions, or
yeah. So not just the grid level energy storage, but also we have a proprietary AI powered energy management system that works through the cloud, and essentially for a given geography, or for a given let's say like a campus, like a port or whatever, we can manage the sources of energy with the consumption of energy, and essentially balance the grid. The grid is only a conduit for energy. It doesn't store energy. That's where the storage part comes in. But there is a storage part required, and with the storage part, there's a new management system that is also going to be required. So these are the two problems that Recursive is working on.
with this source of energy, would you say it is more environment friendly, or is it more efficient as well?
It's definitely not more efficient, as the solar, the efficiency of solar is much less, but it is definitely more environment friendly.
And that's why we should have a conscious turn towards this.
Yes, and it's also in the long term cheaper, right? It's cheaper in terms of the cost to
So
the planet.
wouldn't that make it more efficient as well?
I mean, depends on how you look at efficiency. I mean, yes, in general terms, yes, you can say it's efficient, but as an engineer, I look at like how much energy I can turn from one form to the other. Bottom line is, if you build a coal power plant of a certain capacity, you can essentially control the efficiency of that and get a certain amount of power from that after putting X amount of coal in it, right? That's one thing. In a solar plant, first of all, to get the same amount of power, the solar plant has to be exponentially bigger, and to be able to control how much you get from that plant, that also changes seasonally, if not daily. So it's essentially how much of the energy of the sun you can capture, right? So that needs to be managed a lot.
Okay. There was one more interesting question going back to Rivian times. Companies like Amazon are choosing Rivian over much more branded companies like probably a Mercedes or a Volkswagen. Why is this so?
I think it's in startups have always done better in the EV domain, and I think it's common knowledge that legacy automakers have perhaps struggled a bit with the move to electrification because of their there's a better word for baggage, but yes, like the baggage that they have in terms of their supply chain and all of those things. So electric sort of EV startups have always been more agile and more like faster in terms of delivering on the promise of an electric vehicle product. So that's why I think startups have done better. And talking about people like Amazon who want to very quickly electrify a huge fleet, for them to wait for a legacy automaker to come up with a product and then scale it up to a certain level of production and then buy those products is an option. But they would, if they really want to have a fleet in their disposal, then like Amazon did a great job by just investing in Rivian. And so one of the things they got out of that investment is that they could claim the first few Rivian vans. We essentially built the van to their spec, and only recently Rivian sort of opened up that product for other people to buy. But Amazon got so-called first dibs on that van. So it's easier to make a startup bend to your will and design a product to for your own application.
Yes. So it was more of customization that Amazon was looking forward to.
Yeah, it was customization, and it was making sure that you have access to a certain number of vehicles. I mean, as a logistical operator, Amazon also has to think about its emissions and everything, right? It operates hundreds of thousands of vans in the US as last mile delivery trucks, and they have to pay a price economically for not just in terms of like carbon credits, but also the actual money that they pay at the gas pump for the fuel. So for them, moving to electric vehicles was obviously a thing that was like the most obvious thing that they wanted to do. Now, investing in a startup and getting it from a startup is just to fast track that move instead of waiting for legacy automakers to come up with the scale and the product that an Amazon might require.
So you have undertaken a journey from being an innovator to now being an entrepreneur yourself. And so what do you think about the Indian markets in terms of entrepreneurship? Do you think there is good investment that is available in India? How do you perceive the Indian markets?
I think, like I said, in this particular field, India is still early in terms of, and that's where the opportunity lies. It's very early stages for India to invest in electrification of the fleet of transport. In terms of entrepreneurship, because it's early, I think there are a lot of investment avenues who are aware of the fact that because it's early, there is opportunity. But we've always been a cost-sensitive market, right? So because of that, I think there are challenges. I'm still sort of getting used to the differences between how startups and investments work here versus
How they work there
in the US. Yeah, there are challenges in the US as well. I'm not saying one is easier than the other or anything of that sorts. But there's definitely a lot of information that needs to be disseminated in this part of the world about these challenges, because what we are trying to do is solve the problems of the future, and sometimes that is difficult to imagine or grasp because there are, being a cost sensitive market, we're trying to grab the immediate opportunity and get return on investment immediately. So that's where I have seen like some of the challenges lie. But there are people who are definitely visionaries, who are looking at the long term vision. There are in fact people who have years of experience in the market, who have looked at the solution that Recursive provides, and even before they knew anything about the Recursive, anything about what the product at Recursive was, they knew what was needed, what was the next big thing, and we have those visionaries here. It's just about finding the right people and bringing them together to sort of build and put that
proper solution
out. Yeah. Like, I mean, the pioneers always have the hardest time, right? You
of course,
when you create a first of like one of its kind product, once you create that, once you like the same thing with Rivian, once we create an electric truck, within the next 2 years there were like 10 others in the market. So that's probably what's what people here are also waiting for. But my experience so far has been promising. There are a lot of people who uh, understand the fundamentals of what the problem is. It's just about taking the leap of faith and understanding what the economics of solving that problem looks like.
Cool. And what is the major difference that you find in the work culture here and in the US?
I mean, I might get into controversial territory here, but I guess like one of the major difference in like cultures is just that, I mean, it's a whole new experience for anybody who's working in any field if you know you're like getting paid well for a particular field. The other so I do find India catching up on that front a little bit. Not blaming anyone for it, but yes. The other thing is the aptitude for innovation. I think it's not like we don't have the aptitude for innovation, because trust me, I've been outside. Everybody who's innovating outside, most of them are Indians. So we definitely have the aptitude. But
Probably not the will.
or the incentive, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. To incentivize.
So one leads to the other.
Yeah. We need to incentivize that aptitude. We do believe a lot in Jugaad, which is great. I mean, that's
That's the first step to innovation.
It absolutely is. Like, I mean, it does solve the problem at hand, but we have to come up with a different kind of Jugaad to solve problems of the future as well, and that's what I think will help bridge the gap in technology that exists.
Basically, jugards are not permanent solutions.
Yeah,
right? They are just abhi karna hai, abhi kar diya types thing.
Right. And it has worked for us so far because we have a huge market, and as long as it works for our market, we're good. But again, moving into the future, we have to become the factory of the world. So
Yes.
we have to we have to create products, and we have to create technology and services that the world's feed off of. We've been good with services, but the product itself, we have to innovate. We have to manufacture it
And that's something that we have it in us, because we have the human resource available for mass production. We have the human resource available for creating that kind of technology. The only thing is the thing you said, we need to incentivize probably the will to innovate and come up with permanent and long-term solutions.
Yeah, it's us. Like, it's we who are doing it all over the world for other people. We have to do it for ourselves now, and
do you see India as that market happening in the next probably 10-20 years?
Absolutely, yeah.
Are we moving in that direction?
We are moving in that direction, and that's why some of us are coming back. I think we are definitely moving in that direction. I'm still hoping that the appetite for investing in something that takes a bit longer to bear fruit exists, because these kind of things, these kind of innovative products and these kind of technologies require a longer runway to take off from. And we are very good at software. We're very good at low investment startups. And
I think
like
everywhere
that.
around the world, it's Indians who are leading it.
Right, but again, I don't want to sound alarm bells, but the fact is that with the advent of AI, a lot of that opportunity is at risk.
Yes.
Right? AI can write software. In 5 years, they say that programming is going to be a useless skill to have, because AI can write program. So we have to move from services to a manufacturing based economy, and for that, I think what we will need is a lot of investment going into these
sectors,
those sectors, and also building those products. Like, you can't just manufacture something that already exists somewhere else. We've done that for years, but we have the skill set to come up with a product that works not just for us but for everybody in the world. I think that's the move that some of us are trying to sort of enable and champion in some way. Definitely have the ability to do it. It's just you have to sort of get over a little bit of inertia, like I like to say. Once that happens, I mean, I'm telling you, there's no stopping us.
Awesome. Coming back to the entrepreneurship journey, not the journey per se, but I would like to know your insights. Ki if somebody is investing into this sector, as we were talking about investments, if somebody is investing into the sector, what are the major points that that person should be looking at? Ki, right, this company is probably going in the right way. And what are the red flags that a person should be looking at?
In the EV industry, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
EV energy, like energy in total.
I think any startup in the very beginning essentially is just a team.
Right.
It's a team of people who have come together and who are promising to do a certain thing. Most investors here know that fact. I think one of the things that maybe hasn't worked out for certain investors in India is looking at the promise of the product, looking at the promise instead of the team itself. So that's one major thing I would say. If you can look at a team who have done this before, and I'll tell you one interesting thing about people who can innovate. There are a lot of intelligent people in the world. There are very few intelligent people who can work together.
Right.
That's why I call it a team, right? You can find geniuses everywhere, but most geniuses like to work by themselves. If you find a genius team together, that's, I think, one of the biggest green flags, that you can ever find. And the red flags, like I said, the red flags is essentially going to be if there is too much promise in their idea. Sometimes it makes it unrealistic. If
probably overstating a product or overstating a solution, I would say.
Overestimating their own ability to deliver on that in a given amount of resource or in a given amount of time. That kind of happens all the time. And anybody who's looked at investment knows that that's the primary red flag you look at. But again, like the answer to that, like I would go back and say, if you have a team that has done that before, I mean, historically, those are the startups that have worked, right? The ones that were started by amazing teams. I mean, for me personally, Rivian was that. An amazing team coming together, not really having any idea or any product in the very beginning, but a great technical team along with great leadership. You can figure anything out.
So Nachiket, also tell me something. There are hydrogen cars coming up. So hydrogen cars versus EV, how do you perceive?
Again, like I said, EVs are not going to be the singular solution. The fleet of tomorrow is going to be powered by multiple things. Hydrogen is definitely one of them. The advantage that hydrogen has is that you can fill up the car quickly and keep going instead of waiting and charging it over a period of time. The challenge with hydrogen currently is packing enough amount of energy in a tank within the vehicle to even match the range of the best EV or any petrol or diesel car. Hydrogen as a gas in itself is very it's not as dense as other kinds of fuels in terms of how much energy it can carry within itself. So that's the challenge, but it is definitely one of the things that can be used wherever. See, like there are different use cases for vehicles, like everywhere. There can be a use case where having a hydrogen vehicle, despite the challenge despite the challenge in the range that it has, it can still be feasible. The fact that we have a spectrum of solutions makes it easier for us to find the right solution for the right problem. And EVs, I think, is the answer to 50% of the problems, at least, like out there. Once the infrastructure is up and ready, you're going to have a lot of EVs. And by the way, EVs, the technology that exists in an electric vehicle is not only limited to an electric vehicle. Like I said, the reason why we have an energy company is because there's a huge overlap between grid level storage and electric vehicles.
Right.
It's the battery. It's how you manage the battery. It's how you use the battery. The same thing in other kinds of vehicles as well. Like I worked on a lot of hybrid vehicles when I was at Chrysler. Um, that is also a technology that has a lot of overlap, obviously, with electric vehicles. There are a lot of components. There are motors, inverters, batteries that go into that as well. So in bits and pieces, the hydrogen car, by the way, is also is basically an electric vehicle. It only has a hydrogen fuel cell range extender. There are outliers who can have hydrogen burning engines, but mostly when you talk about a hydrogen car, you're talking about a hydrogen fuel cell car, which is fundamentally an EV. What drives the vehicle is an electric motor. So it's not these different solutions are more alike than they are not, you know. So that's why the existence of all of them and small deltas will make them more adaptable for unique needs. Yeah.
With EVs or with these new energy vehicles, what do you see as a drawback as well? So there are challenges, as I said, there are challenges about charging it for long distances. There are other challenges also. What do you see as challenges, and what are the drawbacks of using these vehicles?
Well, the primary challenge that the customers have seen is range anxiety. Obviously, it takes right now a lot of time to charge. Again, those are things that people like us are working on. They can be, batteries can be made to charge faster. But one of the things that I see is a genuine challenge is the use of electric vehicles in extremely cold conditions, right? When the temperatures are sub-zero throughout. Batteries are usually happier at
Higher
25
degree,
C or
yeah.
like about temperature. So in those areas, like I said again, we will have regular vehicles that can be used, because that's one of the limitations of an electric vehicle. An electric vehicle will spend a lot of energy warming up its own battery to be able to operate. It will operate at that level, but it will be inefficient. It won't be as efficient as it is in a normal climate, because it will spend a lot of energy trying to make its own battery happy. So in those cases, that's one of the disadvantages. That's probably the biggest disadvantage of an EV taking over the entire 100% of all vehicles.
So do you see this being restrictive to certain geological areas in the world?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of EVs in Siberia. I don't see a lot of EVs in Alaska, in Greenland, and in Antarctica. So there you will genuinely have regular IC engine powered vehicles. I mean, they might switch from fossil fuel to some biofuel, making them green, which again is another option. IC engines don't have to go away, but that technology still has a future in these applications, wherever an EV is not feasible. Yeah.
So apart from the geological conditions, any other challenge that you see? Geological conditions and range are the two things that you said.
Yeah, range is one thing. So there is a type of vehicle, essentially in the defense or adventure vehicles, where how you use that vehicle is, you cannot rely on an infrastructure. You cannot create, an army cannot create a tank where you have, chargers from where you are starting to where the enemy is going to be.
Yes.
So those kind of vehicles obviously will have to have conventional powertrains where you are carrying a decent amount of energy that you will spend over, the usage of that vehicle. Also, you will be able to top up when you run out of energy, in whatever form, fuel mostly. So that does exist. An electric vehicle will never be able to match the refueling time, so to speak, of a regular vehicle. I think we ran the numbers somewhere, don't quote me on this, but the amount of energy you transfer into a car when you are at a gas station or at a petrol pump,
right,
filling in, is about at least 1 to 1.5 megawatts. That's the rate at which you are putting energy into the car. And the best EV today can charge at about 500 kilowatts. So, and that's
right,
very expensive EVs. When you look at Indian electric vehicles, you're looking at 30 kilowatts, 50 kilowatts at the most, right? So that's a huge gap. That's a technological barrier for sure. But again, the question is how many people require that? How many use cases are there? Like if I can't fill up my car within 3 minutes and keep going, I don't want that car. That car is useless for me. I don't think anybody like that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the general market, when you stop and fill up your car, even when you're on a road trip, you will go and have a bite, you will use the restroom, it will be 15-20 minutes before you move away anyways. So if I can give you an EV that can charge up within 15-20 minutes, enough to get you to the next stop, then you don't need, for average road tripping also, you wouldn't need any other kind of vehicle. An EV will do.
True, but right now I think in the Indian markets, I think the fastest charging happens probably in an hour's time if you use the fast chargers.
Yeah, I mean,
if you use the normal chargers, it takes anywhere between 8 to 12 hours.
Yeah, so this is another sort of piece of information that needs to, when you use an electric vehicle, right? You usually don't charge it you don't wait till it goes down to 0 and then charge it up to 100 and then keep going. Maybe that's how most people fill up their tanks. Like they wait till they hit empty and then they fill it up and then they move on. An electric vehicle, when you actually start using it, that's not how you do it. You whenever the vehicle is at 20-30%, when you get the opportunity, you would want to charge. Whenever it gets close to 0, your range anxiety is going to kick in and you're going to charge it for whatever it takes to get to the next stop, right? Usually people in the US, like I've driven EVs in the US, you usually charge when you hit like 20 or 30% and you charge up to 80 and then you keep going, because at the end of the day, when you're done driving, you can always come home, put it on charge, and overnight you go from wherever you are to 100, right? So that option you always have.
So you have to be, as a user, you have to be more planned, I believe, with EVs.
And again,
because you cannot wait. Generally इंडिया में हमारी टेंडेंसी होती है कि लास्ट फ्यूल जब तक नहीं आता है तब तक हम रिफ्यूल नहीं करते हैं.
Right. And again, think of your smartphone, right? Like if you're running out of battery and you go to any like Starbucks or whatever and you
plug it in.
It's not like I won't unplug till I hit 100%, right? You will plug it in and get whatever charge you need to get home.
Right.
So that's how like EVs also work. So
one more interesting thing that happened, not interesting, I would say unfortunate thing that happened, was with these few scooters or few vehicles that were being run on the road, and there were instances of these electric vehicles catching fire. Why do you think this happened, and how do people get over the fear of this? Because I met a lot of people, and one primary concern that I faced with them was gaadi jal jayegi.
No, I mean, there are regular vehicles that have also caught on fire. So, I mean, it just, these things grab attention because they are a new kind of vehicle, and people are looking for reasons to move away from it. I think it's a learning curve. What happened in those cases is definitely a failure of the battery pack. It's thermal system, probably a runaway situation happened.
But there were a lot of instances that started happening.
Right. Right, it's a learning curve. Like I said, like we did the least possible investment in developing a product to put a viable product in the market, right? So that comes at a price. The quality has to be compromised somewhere, and that's basically what happened. Like if you do a half-ass job at something, then you're going to have some issues with it. Again, it's a learning curve. Every single electric vehicle manufacturer has had this problem. So I'm not saying that we have done a shoddy job at something. Every single EV manufacturer has gone through a case where their batteries have caught fire at some point in time.
Do you think this fear has somewhere affected the market for EVs?
I don't think so. I think
or just bought it a little back, and then probably it might push forward again.
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, it has probably created a bit of a alarming situation. But again, I think the advantages that you have in terms of operation cost are just way too attractive to overlook. It's not like electric vehicles are more dangerous than average vehicles to drive. In fact, as an engineer, I would tell you they're safer.
Why do you say so?
Because I mean, there are less failure points. Like mechanically, and in an electric vehicle is a simpler machine, right? It takes a lot of moving parts to move a regular vehicle. In an electric vehicle, it's just one motor connected to like a couple of half shafts, and that's it. So that makes the control and operation of a vehicle like simpler. Yes, the battery is a new technology, and yes, somebody needs to master it. That's where, like I said,
Probably a research and innovations unit would work.
yeah, or like back a team that knows how it's done,
Yeah.
and they've done it successfully before. So this expertise, experience will slowly come in and
It will have to
disseminate.
be developed because
It will
it's
have
a
to be
relatively newer
Yeah.
area.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
probably it will have to be developed.
Yeah, as an EV industry, we are paying our dues right now. We're making our mistakes. We will learn. But yes, that's again like it's not a failure as such. It's not like we're doing or we're not capable of doing something, or those products have failed in the market because they caught fire. It's a part of the process. It will happen. But yes, if it continues to happen in your second or third or fifth year of production, then you're definitely doing
Then it's a
something
concern.
wrong.
That's a red flag as well.
Then that's a red flag. Yes. So you've got to solve those problems. You got to take that as data and you got to fix it. When these electric two-wheelers were launched in the first year, there were much more fires than there were in the second year, and in the third year there were even less. And by the time you are in the fifth year, won't be any. So that is bound to happen. Our climate as a whole is hotter than usual. Our cities are hotter than most places in the world. The batteries are going to struggle. So, like I said, electric vehicles are not perfect, but for every problem there is a solution. You need to find the right team to solve it.
So we are talking about the geological conditions. What is the best temperature zone that suits EVs? You said a 25 plus temperature. It will have a higher limit as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't limit the use of EVs to a certain temperature. I would just adapt an EV to deal with the challenging temperatures in certain spaces. Like I said, even in the sub-zero temperatures, you can create an EV and make it work. It's going to spend a lot of energy heating itself up, and that's where it's not going to be efficient. So a solution to any problem can be found, but with that solution, is that solution feasible or not, is the question.
Right.
And I think the problem of higher than average temperatures in India compared to the rest of the world for these EVs is a small problem. It can be easily solved. Without going into the details of it, I think probably some of these two-wheelers that caught fire were perhaps air cooled. They shouldn't have been air cooled. They will figure out a solution for it. They'll have some water cooling, oil cooling, whatever, to fix that problem. It will make the vehicle a bit more expensive, but the problem will be solved.
Cool. So basically, in the challenges that we have seen with EV, there is the geological conditions, there is the range, that is probably a perceived problem.
Yeah.
Apart from that, there is the perception, probably the fear
Yeah.
that we spoke about, but the benefits outweigh the challenges that we are looking.
There could be small, things like, if you're turning an existing vehicle into an electric vehicle, the battery eats up into the luggage space and things like that. There will be small trade-offs. But at the end of the day, you will still end up choosing the electric vehicle because it offers you a huge advantage in operational cost, low maintenance. And for people who drive like less than 100 kilometers, the average person in India drives, I'm sure, less than like 25 kilometers a day. But if an EV gives you a range of even 100 kilometers, imagine never having to go to an electric or a petrol pump. Right? You can always charge at home. Right?
Right.
There are huge advantages to.
So where range is not a problem, I think
Yeah.
EV is a very
Yeah.
good solution right now. Again, with investments, I'm just summing up our conversation. Even with investments, the green flags are the team, as the
Yeah.
management of the company,
Yeah.
the will of the team, and the innovation that the team is wanting to
Yeah.
do, and their ability to work as a
The
team.
quality of the team and the proven record of them having done this before as a team. The anybody can promise anything, but a team who has already delivered on a promise is the green
is
flag.
more likely to
Yeah.
deliver on their next promise. And the red flag is probably they're not learning from their mistakes.
Yeah.
As we said, as we were talking
Yeah.
about the fear that was created in the industry, which kind of pulled the sales a little back. Probably it will push forward again in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. I don't think the sales have been pulled back. I think they're doing pretty well. And
For a short time, I would say,
short time, yes, it created news. So yeah, it's bound to happen for a month or two, but it'll get back.
Thank you so much for talking with us.
All my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.